You might look like you have it all together. You're successful, composed, and reliable. But inside, you're frozen. You feel everything deeply, but you can't express any of it. People say you're cold. You say you're fine, but the truth is, you're exhausted from feeling invisible. If you've spent your whole life feeling fundamentally misunderstood, being called cold, stuck up, or detached, when that's the furthest thing from the truth, and inside you feel everything so deeply, this video is for you. That disconnect between your inner emotional world and how people outside perceive you isn't your fault, and you're not alone. I'm Adam Lane Smith, the attachment specialist, and I've worked with hundreds of high-performing women who present as completely put together on the outside, but on the inside feel chaotic and disconnected from the world around them. What I've discovered is that this specific pattern of emotional freezing has identifiable causes and, more importantly, proven solutions. In this video, I'm going to show you the hidden attachment pattern that's behind this and how to finally feel seen in a good way, connected, and safe. And by the end, you'll understand why you freeze in emotional situations, where this pattern originated from, and the exact steps to begin thawing this response so that you can create the deep connections you've always wanted but couldn't access. Now, if this pattern is you, you have spent years wondering why you disconnect when emotions run high, why your mind goes blank during confrontations, or why you can't express your needs even when you desperately want to. This is actually a protective pattern that's been with you since childhood, and understanding it is the first step to transforming it. Let's start by recognizing what this looks like in your everyday life. You're successful. You're responsible, you appear composed, maybe you're even a CEO or a high-performing professional, or you run your own business. People describe you as together, independent, self-sufficient, but internally, your world is a little bit different. You probably experience chronic fear in social settings where you overthink everything that you do and you say. You feel frozen in relationships because you're afraid of doing or saying the wrong thing or hurting somebody or coming off as inappropriate. In fact, hurting somebody is the worst thing you can possibly imagine, and you would rather face any suffering yourself than accidentally hurt somebody else. Being overly accommodating of others and their inappropriate behaviors is normal for you, especially from partners who are often wildly dysregulated. They demand a tremendous amount of mental energy from you. You've probably had a lifetime of being mislabeled as cold, or distant, or uninterested, or unfeeling, or even called ice princess, and not understanding why people think this way about you. The painful contradiction of caring deeply for others while being blamed for not caring at all. It's just too much. You probably have experienced a constant fear that no one will ever truly accept you, not because you're not worthy of acceptance, but because nobody will ever understand what you really feel. And you might even have a persistent feeling of being fundamentally different from everybody around you, especially in socially connecting, but not knowing what's wrong. Now, if this is hitting so far, I want you to know these are not random personality traits. They're symptoms of a specific attachment pattern that develops from early experiences, and they're far more common than you might think. As I have updated attachment theory for the 21st century to apply to the harsh realities we're living through now, and realistically our modern society and our new social environment we're in, I identified a subtype of disorganized attachment style, sometimes called fearful avoidance style, that had previously gone completely unnoticed because these people were so silent, so undemanding, so accommodating, and so withdrawn that they almost never sought help or caused any problems for anybody else. Because that's the entire purpose of this style, to remain invisible, to stay out of trouble, and to never give anyone cause to focus negative attention on you that could lead to you getting hurt all over again. Now, this quiet, disorganized subtype that I've identified can occur in both men and women. But what I have found is that many women who might otherwise be anxiously attached, but are exposed to additional trauma in childhood and chaos, grow into this subtype and then disappear completely off the radar. They cease to complain about symptoms or anxiety. No one pays attention to their occasional freeze response, and their performance level in academics and work is so high that everyone around them just assumes they're fully functional. These women disappear entirely from everyone's radar and live in stealth mode. The quiet, disorganized men in the world are still visible because their freeze response is very noticeable in men, and it's designed and identified as insecurity, while it's dismissed benevolently as shyness in women. So quiet, disorganized men usually get lumped over there with anxious men in the nice guy pool. But this is why quiet, disorganized women have appeared completely invisible to the psychology community for almost a century until now. And as a quick aside, if you've been in years and years of therapy and it has never helped, this is why. It's because psychology and attachment theory has never accounted for you before. You have not existed in psychology. Now you do. I've got you. The central feature of this attachment pattern is emotional freezing. It looks like a couple of different things. First, the amygdala, which is primed to detect danger, now detects danger everywhere in every relationship all the time. And it releases a flood of cortisol while simultaneously tracking every possible variable that might lead to danger. This brain response activates the limbic system, fight, flight, fawn, freeze, and it reduces the functioning of the prefrontal cortex that's used to judge variables and outcomes, causing a conflict that leads to overload and shutdown in your ability to make decisions, especially in social situations. The female brain makes this even worse because it observes in the back and then goes back and forth across the hemispheres to analyze. As you lose your prefrontal cortex and go into a panic state, it rapid fires back and forth and then misfires and leads to what we call analysis paralysis, where your system begins to shut down without even having access to your logical centers. You go completely blank in emotional conversations when you need to say something, but you can't. Broca's area, the language center in the speech area of the brain, shuts down and limits your ability to speak. This leads to what we call selective mutism. You're not able to speak because you are so overloaded. What does this look like? Well, it looks like the other person saying, say something. Just tell me what you want. Tell me what you expect. Just tell me what to do. And you open your mouth and you actually can't speak. You can't even articulate needs. Even when directly asked, your eyes get big and you just can't. You can't speak. Your mouth might not even open, so you just stare at them like this, and they assume you are refusing. And this makes it worse. In fact, in childhood, this probably made it worse. You probably got in trouble for not communicating enough. And then when you did communicate, it was always wrong. And that's why this is happening. Watching yourself be silent when you desperately want to speak up actually increases your distress and panic. At this point, most women I work with quiet disorganized style, they almost start crying. So if you're crying right now, that's totally okay. But they're crying because they finally understand that their system is doing this on purpose and that they're not just being bad. They're not refusing. They've been yelled at their whole life for refusing to comply. You're not refusing to comply. Your system is preventing you from complying. You're not bad. I just want to be clear, okay? Feeling physically stiff or locked when your emotions intensify, the dorsal vagal shutdown, your system just locks down. If you're being attacked by a bear and you can't run away and you can't escape and you can't fight and you can't please the bear, well, then the last thing left is freeze. Lay on the ground, curl up, protect your organs, wait for the bear to be done mauling you, and then when it leaves, now you pick up, you patch up your bleeding, and you move on. This is a basic survival mechanism from our evolutionary adaptations and hunter-gatherer style. This is your brain trying to survive when nothing else is left. And then when you try to access your emotions and your feelings, you've dissociated from them. So it's like a computer returning the error that says file not found. Someone says, how do you feel right now? And complete gone, right? That look, I don't know. What feelings should I be having? Please tell me what feelings I should have. I will have those. And then you develop increasing frustration in others who perceive your freeze response as a refusal to share, refusal to be honest, leading to them to believe that you're either indifferent, you're unloving, you're cold. This is the negative impact on the outside because they don't recognize what's happening. Usually because you've locked your responses inward and you just go like this. You go from calm and having a conversation to frozen, stiff, and silent, and they don't see the change. They don't see how rapidly it shifts. This freeze is not a choice, you guys. It's not a character flaw either. It's a neurobiological survival response that once protected you, but now prevents the very connection you desire. What makes this pattern so isolating is that others can't see the rich inner emotional world that you actually do possess. Now, I want to make it clear, when not in a freeze response, these women do experience and feel emotions, but they express them minimally, if at all. They constantly have a poker face on at all times, usually because their parents punished them if they showed too much expression. They were too happy, too sad. They are just blank face. We call it blank affect. Negative, complete blank affect. No face. They crave intimate connection while simultaneously finding it terrifying. These women want to connect, but they don't believe there's ever a way to safely connect to anyone ever, and that no one would accept them, so they just stay locked inside. Their empathy for others is extreme, often to their detriment, right? You could probably think of examples of times that you have overperformed and overgiven to everybody else. You probably carry profound loneliness that persists even when you're with other people, maybe especially when you're with other people, just because you can feel that disconnect in the moment. And your self-awareness of your own self and what you're doing and your impact is massively strong and acute. But self-expression feels impossible. Most of these women would walk way around a patch of grass just to not offend one blade of grass by bending it. Like, literally, I'm not even joking. That's not hyperbole. Most of these women try not to step on grass because grass has feelings too, and grass deserves to live. Grass deserves dignity. Ladies, you're probably watching right now, laughing at yourself a little bit. You can think of times you've probably done that. Okay. The disconnect between your inner experience, though, and your outer expression is the core of what I call the quiet, disorganized style, a state where your emotional organization system has been disrupted, but in ways that are not obvious to others. They think you're cold, and on the inside, you're lonely. Now, this freeze response you experience today has deep roots in your earliest relationships and your experiences. Understanding where this pattern comes from isn't about placing blame, by the way. Most just quiet, disorganized women I talk to are hesitant to even mention that their parents weren't perfect. It's about recognizing that your brain adapted to protect you in circumstances where you had no or limited power. Let's explore how this protective mechanism develops and why it's still operating today. The quiet, disorganized pattern develops in very specific environments. Childhood emotional neglect, inconsistent caregiving, having to be the adult way too early for your family and manage other people's emotions for them. Subtle but persistent invalidation of your emotional reality and being told your emotions are wrong over and over and you're not allowed to have them. Environments where expressing needs as a child led to rejection, abandonment, or even punishment. You may not even remember being 2 years old and asking for a toy or a cookie and how immediate and strong that punishment was, so you learned to never ask for anything ever again. Households where emotional chaos or volatility is normal. That chaos and extreme swinging is exactly what creates a highly adaptable situation and an internal experience where you're both anxious and avoidant, constantly back and forth, where you are staying away from people until you can't and then fawning to get their approval. And if that doesn't work, you collapse to the floor, you cover your sensitive areas and you freeze and you wait for the damage to be done. That's environments where that was required of you. I'm going to be very honest with here and be very real. This style usually incorporates the most intense trauma stories of pain, suffering, abuse, and betrayal that I've ever heard in all of my years of doing this work. But the client who comes into my coaching usually has no insight that these experiences were abnormal or that the childhood trauma is currently impacting their adult life because they've simply accepted them as the way things are. Sometimes they'll tell you about the time that they were 11 years old and had a miscarriage from an incest abuse relationship. And they'll just say it because to them it's normal. And then they'll dismiss it and say, but they weren't a bad person. They were probably hurt too. They instantly jump to the defense of other people. They'll tell you the most agonizing experiences they've had about how mom used to scream at them every single day and tell them they were horrible because dad left and she said it was my fault. Or how mom was completely collapsing and she had to step forward and take care of mom every day, or whatever the situation might be. These are horrible, painful life experiences that cause such intense damage that they can't fight. They can almost never run away. They can't really fawn enough to get approval and connection to make a difference. So instead, they freeze rock solid to the point that they can't even have relationships for the most part. Okay? They've accepted that this is the way things are. These experiences taught your developing brain that emotional expression was dangerous or futile, and that creating disconnection between feeling and expressing is safe. And that persists into adulthood. So again, one more time, what's happening in your body during emotional freezing is an actual physiological process. Your nervous system shifts into a dorsal vagal shape, freezing your system. Broca's area, responsible for speech, temporarily shuts down. Cortisol floods your system, which creates physical tension. Your prefrontal cortex that handles complex communication and judgment goes offline. You switch to your limbic system, fight, flight, fawn, freeze. And fight and flight are gone, so fawn and freeze is all that's left. Memory retrieval becomes impaired, making it hard to access thoughts. And now you can't conversate or even speak to the other person. You don't know what to say. You don't know what not to say, so you just freeze. This explains why you can't just speak up, because your body is physically preventing it as a protection mechanism. Over time, this pattern becomes self-reinforcing. As you have each freezing episode, it confirms the belief that freezing was the only way to get through. And then that, as people push back and give you criticism, confirms to you that you're fundamentally flawed from other people's perspectives. Avoiding emotional situations becomes a coping strategy, so you stay withdrawn and isolated as a protective mechanism. Your relationships become increasingly difficult to navigate over time. Your internal shame about who you are, your feelings, your thoughts, and that one time you accidentally bent that blade of grass, that grows with each failed attempt at connection or fulfilling your high ethical standards. And the gap between who you are and who others see widens. Without intervention, this cycle continues to narrow your life and deepen your isolation, despite your best achievements in other areas. Now, many of you women watching this right now, my heart goes out to you. You're experiencing that moment of clarity right now where pieces of your life finally make sense. I know this understanding is powerful, but transforming these deeply ingrained patterns requires expert guidance. I'll warn you right now. Through my one-on-one coaching programs, I provide women just like you with personalized strategies to break free from the freeze response and build genuine connections where they feel truly seen. I've developed some specific techniques that work with your nervous system rather than working against it, for example, because that's never going to work. So if you're tired of feeling misunderstood and invisible, click the link in the description to schedule a free consultation call with my team. Let's work together to help your authentic self emerge from behind these protective barriers. Now, let's explore this attachment style and how it impacts your relationships. So this freeze response shapes the closest relationships in your life, particularly your romantic connections. While you deeply desire authentic intimacy, this protective pattern creates invisible barriers that keeps others at a distance. Understanding how this manifests in your relationships reveals why certain patterns keep repeating, despite your best intentions. Let's examine how this plays out in your everyday interactions. For example, this attachment style creates a predictable relationship cycle in romance. First, you attract partners with big personalities and bigger problems because they're the only ones who can push through your boundaries as if they aren't there, largely because you freeze. You forget how to say no, and they see that and move through it. They're the only people that continue to push through the freeze response to see what's really there. Everybody else is too polite or withdrawn and pulls back when you freeze. These people are the only ones who push through. Now, these relationships almost become, every single time, one-sided, with you over-giving. And over time, they give less and less and take more and more, demand more and more. You're consumed with worrying that you're not good enough or doing enough, and you cater to their endless needs and demands hoping it will finally be enough. And when you're overwhelmed, you quietly withdraw rather than expressing your needs. Your partners become frustrated in a couple of ways. Number one, because their behaviors are unsustainable and it's never going to work, but usually also by your emotional inaccessibility. While they're still pushing you into over accommodating their demands. You're not giving me enough. Now I demand you give me more, right? Relationships tend to end when their behaviors finally cause so much chaos in your life, you can't tolerate it anymore. Maybe they're endlessly cheating multiple times. They're simply being unreasonable for so long you can't handle the stress anymore. Or they might leave as you finally apply the smallest boundaries drawn from your desperation. But eventually you can't sustain your giving, and they're gone. Now, the real tragedy here is that you're often blamed for breaking up the relationship because they tell you were emotionally unavailable, when in reality, you gave everything and you felt everything intensely, but you couldn't express it. Now at work, the quiet, disorganized style creates a fascinating paradox. You excel in structured environments with clear expectations. Your reliability and competence makes you highly valued in good teams. You avoid office politics and social dynamics that feel unsafe, so you're not gossiping and contributing to issues. Your emotional labor goes unseen and unappreciated, but you dump yourself into your work and you'll work overtime without even mentioning it. And you're often exhausted from maintaining your functional facade. Everyone else relies on you as the MVP of the team. It's a totally different world from romance. This helps explain why many quiet, disorganized women achieve massive professional success or financial success while struggling deeply in their closest personal relationships. The cumulative effect of this is profound isolation. You feel invisible even when you're physically present. You have deep loneliness that persists regardless of your circumstances. You assume others wouldn't want your company or your input. I think of one quiet, disorganized woman, she's probably watching right now, who had an adult daughter. And she said, I don't want to bother her, so I hardly ever call her. And I said, you should ask her how often she wants to talk to you. And she said, no, that would bother her even just asking. I said, do me a favor. Ask her how often she'd like to hear from you. So she did. And she came back the next week so excited and said she wants to talk to me every Sunday. Why would she want that? I'm so happy, but why would she want that? And I said, well, that's your next question to ask her. Why does she want to connect with you? Why does it make her happy to connect with her mom? Why does it make her happy to get attention like that? Ask her that. Let's have that conversation next, right? They don't think other people want them, so they pull away, and other people say, why are you leaving me? Initiating connection probably feels impossible to you, despite craving it. Because again, like that woman, you don't want to be a burden. You don't want to cause a problem. You don't want to cause a fuss. You don't want to make someone feel like they have to talk to you on a Sunday. So what happens? You watch life pass by without fully participating in it. This isolation is not a choice. It's the painful result of a protective system that has outlived its usefulness. So here's what you're going to do. Understanding your patterns, it's powerful. But transformation requires action. The freeze response that you've developed was an adaptive response in an environment where your emotional needs were not met. However, this neural pathway is not your destiny. At the moment, it's simply the path of least resistance that your brain currently takes over and over and over. Through intentional practice and compassionate self-awareness, you can create new neural pathways that will lead to the connection you've always deserved. Here are the steps that a woman with quiet, disorganized attachment needs to take to begin her healing process. Number one is to gain awareness of the impact of your attachment style. You're doing that right now, by the way, by watching this video. Recognizing that your current behaviors were developed through childhood trial and error and learning. Your nervous system adapted to an environment where other strategies didn't work or they weren't safe. So understanding that something called selective bias has been shaping your perceptions. What this means is that your brain learned to filter experiences through the lens of past unsafe environments, making it difficult to recognize when connection was actually safe. Your whole life you've expected that it wasn't, so every time you get into a situation that's not, it's reconfirmed. You also are accidentally pushing away healthy experiences because you don't trust them. They feel more unsafe because you don't know where the trap is. And then acknowledging that these protective behaviors now hold you back from forming the healthy relationships you desire. What once served as protection now functions as a barrier. This awareness creates a gap between your fear response and your reaction. In this space, when you have a fear response and then when you choose to react, You gain the power to choose a different path rather than defaulting to the automatic freeze response that has kept you stuck. This shift allows you to make an intellectual and proactive shift in how you understand your patterns. The cognitive awareness is the foundation that makes emotional change possible because you now recognize that you can respond in a more effective way. Next comes challenging your old behaviors by learning new social rules. Deliberately study how healthy relationships function and what secure attachment looks like in practice. Observe, read, and consciously integrate this knowledge. Begin communicating, for example, directly with people in your life about their emotional and relationship needs. Ask specific questions. Would you prefer I share more about what I'm feeling? Or how can I show up for you better? What kind of relationship would you like from me as your mother? How often would you like me to be calling you? That was a transformational question that woman asked. Even something as simple as texting a friend saying, I want to share something, but it's hard for me to find the words. That's creating connection. That's rewiring your brain pattern right there. Also remember, this process isn't linear. You'll still freeze sometimes. Your brain rewiring is happening ongoing, okay? It's completely normal to have moments where you step back, but every time you name what's happening and you stay in connection, even just for 5 more seconds, longer than you normally would, you're actively rewiring your neural pathways. Every small step builds on the previous one. Notice the positive biofeedback that occurs when people respond positively and the connections that deepen in your life. Your body releases oxytocin, vasopressin, dopamine, serotonin, neurochemicals that create feelings of safety, acceptance, love, and belonging. When that woman's daughter said, no, I would love to hear from you more. I just thought you didn't want to talk to me. But if you want to call me every Sunday for, let's say, an hour, I would be so happy. Wow. A rush of biochemistry through her whole body. Love, acceptance, kindness, care, shock, actually. Recognizing that this positive feedback loop works both ways. As you connect authentically, the other person also experiences those neurochemical rewards, strengthening the bond from both sides. Another quite disorganized woman that I knew had a son, and she was in her late 50s and he was in his early 20s. And she called him and said, have you ever felt like I was disconnected or disinterested and that I didn't want to be talking to you? And he said, yes, all of my life, I felt like you just didn't want to talk to me. And she said, I have always loved you and always wanted to talk to you. I didn't want to bother you. So they had spent the first 20 some odd years of his life disconnected. She learned what he wanted. And that, as he said, you've always loved me and you've always been interested. It was just a huge misunderstanding. At first, it was frustrating. But as time went on, he began to heal from his attachment issues. He had believed his mom didn't really love him or want him. All of a sudden, he had absolute definitive proof he had always been loved. He had always been desired. He has always been cared for. And that was transformative for him. Not only did she improve her life, she fixed her son's wounds. This feedback loop is transformational for the people around you. So to all the women out there who don't want to hurt that blade of grass, imagine being a vector of healing for the people around you so they can finally feel the love they've always craved. Approaching your social skills as learnable patterns that require intentional practice is crucial here. Similar to how a person might learn any complex skill through direct instruction and repeated exposure. It's not that you can't do it. It's that you've never been trained to. In fact, you've been trained not to socially engage. Learning that it's okay to socially engage and then picking up the skills, that is where your confidence comes from. And then establishing that biofeedback loop is crucial. And then committing to the consistent practice that rewires your brain pathways over time. This is mandatory, okay? Each positive interaction you have strengthens the new pattern every time you do it for the rest of your life. Connection gradually feels safer and more rewarding and increasingly desirable as your nervous system updates its threat assessment and the freeze response diminishes. Your mindset will begin shifting from avoiding pain and fearing connection to actively seeking opportunities for joy and fulfillment and meaningful shared experiences with other people. You can generalize your new skills across different relationships and contexts, gradually expanding your comfort zone while maintaining awareness of your nervous system signals, connecting with a partner, your friends, your children, your adult children, your family, people who are safe and loving, and giving them that love in return so you no longer are the ice princess. You're the Queen of Hearts. Test these skills with some healthy individuals in your life, okay? You can begin providing authentic feedback to them, and they can provide it to you about what works best for the both of you. And you can build a secure relationship, and that allows you to continuously refine your approach and meet each other's needs. Now, let's be very, very clear here. The goal is not to become someone else. I'm not here telling you you're not good enough, so you have to change. It's to integrate all the natural parts of yourself. Your competence and your strength, they remain valuable assets. Your self-sufficiency and your independence are great things. Your deep empathy for others becomes a gift to those you love rather than a burden to yourself. Your internal emotional world becomes accessible to safe people by choice, and they can stop misunderstanding you, and then they won't get hurt anymore. Your ability to navigate complex systems serves authentic connections and heartfelt relationships. You're finally going to be comfortable with those people, and you can give them abundant love. And you will no longer be lonely. And your unique perspective enriches relationships rather than isolating you as you become increasingly comfortable with sharing your observations with others. You're hyper-attuned to the world around you. You can share your useful observations to help them navigate their world in smarter ways. Now, I know this is possible because I've seen this transformation countless times in women who believed it was impossible. So if you've been nodding along to this video, recognizing yourself in these patterns, please know that what you're experiencing is real. Your struggle is not a character defect or a weakness. It's the result of adaptive responses that once protected you, but now limit you. And most importantly of all, you are not alone in this experience. The freeze response that's controlled your emotional life also is not permanent. With understanding, support, and consistent practice, you can develop whole new patterns of connection that allow your truest self to be seen, known, and accepted. That rich internal world that you've always had can become accessible to others and create an authentic relationship structure that you've always wanted. So if this resonates with you, if you're ready to transform these patterns, I work with women exactly like you through my coaching program. I'll guide you step by step through the process of thawing the freeze response and building authentic connections with other people. Click the link in the description to schedule a free consultation call with my team where we can discuss your specific situation and how we can help. Don't spend another minute feeling unseen, disconnected, and unwanted. The change that you want is possible, starting now. If this has been helpful, please make sure you like this video, share it with somebody who might need to hear it, subscribe to this channel if you're not already, and drop me a comment below. Let me know which part of this video really hit your heart the most, and which one, hopefully, gave you a little bit of hope.